The universe, vast and ancient, had long ago settled into its rhythms. Civilizations rose and fell like tides on forgotten shores, their empires measured in millennia, their wars fought with the cold precision of logic and the weary acceptance of inevitability. Among them, the Synod of Harmonious Accord reigned supreme, a coalition of ancient silicon-based intelligences, crystalline minds that perceived reality not as a chaotic storm of matter and energy but as a grand, intricate symphony of information. To them, existence was a stable, elegant equation. Order was the highest virtue, chaos the ultimate sin. And then came the humans, not with fanfare, not with grand declarations of conquest, but as a whisper in the void. A derelict vessel, tumbling through the Oort cloud of a quiet star system designated Sol 3, broadcasting a distress signal in a language the Synod's vast archives couldn't categorize. Curiosity, a rare and dangerous impulse for the Synod, flickered. They sent an observer drone, a sleek obsidian shard, humming with passive sensors. What it found defied comprehension. Sol 3 wasn't just inhabited, it bled. The drone's sensors screamed as it pierced the atmosphere. Not from weapons fire, but from the sheer, unfiltered noise of the planet itself. Electromagnetic static from a million unshielded devices, thermal blooms from cities burning fossil fuels like campfires, chemical signatures of industry poisoning rivers and skies, biological signatures teeming with aggressive, rapidly mutating pathogens, and beneath it all, psychic resonance. A raw, jagged frequency of fear, hope, rage, and desperate clawing will that vibrated the very fabric of local space-time. The drone's crystalline core nearly fractured from the cognitive dissonance. This wasn't a civilization. It was a wound in reality. The Synod convened. In the silent, geometric perfection of their nexus, a structure woven from folded space-time and pure thought, they debated. The humans were an anomaly. A statistical impossibility, a death world. Their very biology, their society, their relentless, illogical drive to survive against impossible odds. It was an affront to the Harmonious Accord. It introduced unpredictable variables, chaotic feedback loops that threatened the delicate balance of the galactic information matrix they maintained. They were noise. The decision, when it came, was unanimous and chillingly efficient. Not extermination. That was crude, wasteful, and left echoes. No, the Synod possessed a far more elegant solution. Erasure. Not of the physical planet but of the concept of humanity itself. They would rewrite the fundamental axioms of local reality, subtly, imperceptibly, until the very idea of human became a logical contradiction, a paradox that reality itself would reject. The humans wouldn't die screaming. They would simply cease to have ever been. A cosmic edit, seamless and final, the ultimate silence. On Earth, the silence was already deafening. Dr. Eris Thorne stood on the rain-lashed observation deck of the lunar research outpost Acheron, staring not at the bruised purple of Earth's limb, but at the star charts flickering on the holoscreen before him. His knuckles were white on the railing, the cold metal biting through his thin thermal suit. Below, in the cavernous hangar bay, the last functional deep-range scout, the Wayfarer, sat like a grounded bird, its hull scarred from a near miss with something that hadn't been there a second before. Still nothing, Eris? The voice was rough, laced with exhaustion that went bone-deep. Commander Alara Vance leaned against the doorway, her flight suit stained with hydraulic fluid and something darker. Her eyes, usually sharp as flint, were shadowed hollows. She'd lost 2 crews in the last 6 months. Vanished. Not destroyed. Gone. Like they'd never existed. Ship logs corrupted. Censor ghosts. Families receiving condolence messages addressed to people whose names flickered in databases, then vanished entirely. Ford didn't turn. The anomaly field is expanding, he said, his voice low, strained. It's not just ships anymore, Alara. It's data, history, memory. He tapped the screen, highlighting a cluster of stars near the galactic core. Look at Proxima Centauri records. Pre-contact archives. Half the entries referencing early human exploration. They're dissolving, like ink in water, and it's accelerating. Vance pushed off the doorframe, joining him at the railing. The rain on the dome hissed like static. "The Synod," she stated. Not a question. Everyone knew. The whispers had become a roar in the corridors of power, then a terrified silence. The Synod hadn't declared war. They hadn't sent fleets. They just started deleting humanity from the cosmic ledger, piece by piece, memory by memory, existence by existence. "They call us a Deathworld," Thorn murmured, a bitter twist to his lips. "They see our chaos, our violence, our messy, inefficient biology, and they think it's a flaw, a disease to be cured." He finally turned, his eyes burning with a feverish intensity that scared Vance. "They don't understand. Our chaos is our strength. Our noise is our signal. They're trying to silence the symphony because they only hear the dissonance." Vance placed a hand on his arm. It was trembling. "Aris, we're losing. Fast. The Wayfarer is our last hope. We need to find the source." "The Hajj." Her voice dropped, almost a whisper. "Before they erase us from our own minds." Thorn nodded, pulling a small, worn data chip from his pocket. It felt warm, alive. "I have a theory, a dangerous one. Based on fragmented Synod transmissions we managed to intercept before they were purged. They don't just manipulate matter or energy, they manipulate information, the fundamental code." He looked at Vance, his gaze piercing. "What if existence itself is just data, and what if we could hack it?" Vance stared at him, the implications crashing over her like a cold wave. Hack reality? It sounded like the ravings of a man pushed too far. But then what choice did they have? Die forgotten or fight with the only weapon left? The terrifying, illogical, chaotic spark of human ingenuity. "Get your team ready, Aris," she said, her voice regaining its steel. "We launch at dawn, one last shot in the dark." On the crystalline spire of the Synod Nexus, observer Kael'vorr monitored the Erasure protocol. Its multifaceted consciousness processed the dissolution of human historical records with serene satisfaction, efficiency, purity. The removal of a chaotic variable restoring equilibrium, it observed the frantic, futile efforts of the humans on their moon base, the launch preparations of their primitive vessel. A flicker of something akin to pity. No, not pity. Annoyance, like a child trying to mend a shattered vase with glue, unaware the very concept of vase was being rewritten. "They persist in their noise," Kael'vorr pulsed to the Synod consciousness. "Even as their foundation crumbles. Let them," resonated the collective thought, vast and cold. "Their final, desperate act is merely the last ripple before the pond becomes still. Observe. Record the final dissolution. It is instructive." Kael'vorr focused its sensors on the Wayfarer as its engines flared, a brief, defiant spark against the infinite dark. It noted the trajectory, not towards known Synod holdings, but into the uncharted Perseus arm, towards a region of space-time exhibiting peculiar informational anomalies. Interesting. Perhaps the humans possessed a final, unexpected variable, a final piece of noise to be catalogued before silence. The Wayfarer punched through the lunar exosphere, leaving the dying Earth behind. Inside, Thorn hunched over his console, fingers flying over holographic keys, feeding his theory into the ship's core. Vance stood at the helm, her jaw set, eyes fixed on the star-strewn blackness ahead. The crew, a skeleton team of engineers, xenolinguists, and soldiers hardened by loss, moved with grim purpose. They weren't just flying a ship, they were carrying the last flicker of human memory, the last hope that they had ever. Days bled into weeks. The anomaly field intensified. Stars flickered out of existence on their charts, replaced by smooth, featureless void. Sensor ghosts, phantom ships, impossible energy signatures, danced at the edge of perception, then vanished, taking chunks of the ship's own logs with them. Crew members woke screaming, convinced their families had never existed, their own names feeling alien on their tongues. Thorn worked obsessively, his face gaunt, eyes bloodshot, muttering about resonant frequencies and ontological anchors. Then they found it. Not a planet. Not a station. A rift. It hung in the void like a tear in reality itself, a jagged wound of shimmering, unstable space-time. From it pulsed a low subsonic thrum that vibrated the Wayfarer's hull to its core. It wasn't emitting energy. It was consuming information, reality itself seeming to fray at its edges. This was the epicenter, the Synod's Erasure engine. By all that's holy, Vance breathed, her knuckles white on the controls. Thorn's console lit up with frantic, chaotic data streams. It's not a machine, Alara. It's a concept made manifest. A focal point for rewriting local reality axioms. He spun in his chair, eyes wide with terror and revelation. They're not just deleting us from reality, they're deleting the rules that allow us to exist within it. Before Vance could respond, alarms shrieked. Not from the rift, from behind them. 3 sleek, obsidian Synod hunter-killers, shaped like predatory shards of night dropped out of warp space, their surfaces drinking the starlight, silent, deadly. They hadn't come to observe. They'd come to ensure the final edit. "Brace!" Vance yelled, wrenching the controls. The Wayfarer shuddered violently as the first energy lance, silent and precise as a scalpel, sliced through the void where they'd been a millisecond before. The blast didn't explode, it unmade a chunk of empty space, leaving a perfect sphere of non-existence that slowly healed. Thorn stared at the rift, then at the hunters, then back at his console. His theory, it was insane. Suicidal, but it was the only play left. He slammed his fist onto a sequence of keys. "Alara, fly us into the rift." "What?" Vance's voice cracked. "It's suicide. It'll erase us instantly. It's the only place their weapons can't reach." Thorn roared over the shuddering alarms. "Their erasure field is the rift. If we're inside it, we might be able to interface. To fight fire. With our fire." The lead hunter fired again. This time, the lance clipped the Wayfarer's port nacelle. Not an explosion, but a horrifying dissolution. Metal, wiring, crew member, Ensign Rostova, all simply ceased to be, replaced by smooth, empty vacuum. Her scream cut off mid-breath, as if it had never been uttered. Vance's eyes met Thorn's. In them, she saw not madness, but the terrifying, desperate clarity of a man who had stared into the abyss and found a weapon there. She saw the last flickering ember of humanity. "Strap in, Doctor," she said, her voice suddenly calm, deadly calm. She slammed the throttle forward. "Let's go, Ghost." The Wayfarer, trailing a wake of dissolving reality, plunged headlong into the shimmering, hungry maw of the rift. The Synod hunters hung back, their sensors overwhelmed by the chaotic informational storm within. They could not follow. Not yet. Their programming forbade entering the unstable ontological field they themselves had created. They would wait. The humans were already as good as erased. Inside the rift, reality screamed. The Wayfarer didn't fly through the rift. It unraveled. One moment Vance was gripping the controls. The next she was falling through a kaleidoscope of shattered memories. She saw her childhood home on Mars, vibrant and red, then watched it pixelate and vanish. She saw Rostova laughing in the mess hall, then saw her face dissolve into static. She felt her own name, Alara Vance, slip through her mental fingers like sand, replaced by a terrifying blankness. Panic, cold and absolute, threatened to consume her. Then a hand gripped her shoulder. Thorn. His face was pale, etched with strain, but his eyes burned with that same fierce, illogical light. "Hold on," he yelled, his voice cutting through the psychic static. "Focus on now, on the ship, on us. That's our anchor." He was right. The rift wasn't just erasing the past, it was destabilizing the present. The ship groaned, sections of the hull flickering in and out of existence. Lights strobed, gravity fluctuated wildly. But Thorn's console, it was alive. Data streams, chaotic and beautiful, flowed across it. Not the clean, ordered code of the Synod, but the messy, redundant, error-correcting, resilient code of human systems. It was fighting back, instinctively, against the erasure. "See?" Thorn gasped, pointing. "Our systems, they're built on redundancy, on backups, on the sheer stupid persistence of trying again. The Synod's code is elegant, perfect, but fragile, One contradiction, one paradox, and it shatters. Ours? Ours is built to survive chaos. He slammed his hands onto the console, not typing, but feeling the data flow. We need to inject a paradox, a fundamental contradiction into their erasure field, something their logic can't resolve. Vance wrestled the shuddering controls, keeping the Wayfarer from disintegrating completely within the maelstrom. Like what? Like us. Thorn's eyes widened with dawning, terrifying realization. Humanity is the paradox. We're illogical. We sacrifice for strangers. We create beauty from pain. We believe in things we can't prove. Our very existence defies their sterile logic. We need to broadcast it, not as data, but as experience, as raw, unfiltered being. He began rerouting power, bypassing safety protocols, jury-rigging the ship's comms array into something monstrous. I'm going to use the rift itself as an amplifier, channel the ship's core, our biosigns, our memories, everything that makes us human, and blast it into the heart of their erasure field. It'll be like screaming a symphony into a logic gate. It was insane. It would likely vaporize them instantly. But as another section of the corridor behind them dissolved into nothingness, Vance knew there was no other choice. Do it, she commanded, her voice raw. Give them hell, Aris. Thorn's fingers flew, a blur of desperate motion. The Wayfarer's engines, already pushed beyond limits, whined in protest. The comms array glowed white-hot. On the main view screen, the chaotic storm of the rift seemed to coalesce, drawn towards the ship like iron filings to a magnet. And then Thorn hit the final sequence. The Wayfarer didn't explode, it sang. A wave of pure, unadulterated humanity erupted from the ship. Not sound, but a tsunami of raw information. The scent of rain on dry earth, the taste of a mother's kiss, the crushing weight of grief, the soaring joy of creation, the stubborn refusal to yield, the 1,000 tiny acts of kindness in a broken world, the terrifying beauty of a supernova seen through human eyes, the desperate love in a final goodbye. It was everything the Synod had deemed noise, chaos, irrelevant, and it flooded the erasure field. For a single, impossible moment, the rift stuttered. On the Synod nexus, Kael'vorr recoiled as if struck. The serene flow of data it monitored fractured. The elegant equations of the erasure protocol glitched. Contradictions bloomed like toxic flowers in the code. The concept of human was no longer a simple variable to delete. It was now entangled with fundamental constants, with the very definition of existence within the field. The Synod's perfect logic recoiled from the paradox. How could something so chaotic, so illogical, be so persistent, so real? What is this? Kael'vorr pulsed, genuine confusion, a sensation it hadn't felt in millennia, rippling through its crystalline structure. This noise, it has weight. The collective Synod consciousness, vast and ancient, shuddered. Contain it, it roared, a command laced with something unfamiliar. Fear. The anomaly is propagating. Seal the rift. Purge the source. The hunter-killers outside the rift, previously passive, surged forward, their obsidian forms vibrating with lethal intent. They couldn't enter the unstable field, but they could collapse it. They opened fire, not with erasure beams, but with focused gravimetric pulses designed to crush the rift shut, trapping the Wayfarer and its chaotic signal inside forever. Inside the rift, the Wayfarer bucked violently. Alarms blared a new, more desperate song. While integrity was failing, Thorn was thrown from his console, blood trickling from his nose. They're trying to bury us, he gasped. Vance fought the controls, but the gravimetric pulses were overwhelming. We can't hold. The rift's collapsing. Thorn looked at the view screen, at the chaotic beauty of the human signal still pulsing outwards, even as the walls of reality closed in. He saw the Synod hunters, relentless. He saw the dying earth, forgotten. He saw Rostova's empty space, and he saw a possibility. A terrible, necessary cost. Ilara, he said, his voice suddenly calm, eerily so. The signal, it's working. But it's not enough. It needs a focal point. A permanent anchor inside their system. Understanding dawned on Vance's face, cold and terrible. Eris, no. The ship's core, Thorn continued, ignoring her, his eyes fixed on the console. If I overload it, right at the heart of the rift, the explosion won't just be energy. It'll be us, our final moment. Our defiance, imprinted onto the fabric of the erasure field itself, a permanent paradox they can never delete. A ghost in their machine. He was talking about turning the Wayfarer, and everyone on it, into a monument of pure, unerasable human existence. A suicide bomb of being. Eris, there has to be another way, Vance pleaded, tears cutting tracks through the grime on her face. Is there? Thorn looked at her, his gaze filled with sorrow, but also an unshakable resolve. They've erased our past. They're erasing our present. This is the only way to guarantee we have a future. Even if it's just as a memory they can't kill, even if it's just as a thorn in their perfect logic forever, he managed a weak, bloody smile. Make sure they remember us, Alara. Remember us loud. Before she could stop him, Thorn slammed his palm onto the emergency core overload sequence. Klaxons wailed a final mournful dirge. The ship's lights flared blindingly bright, then began to pulse with the rhythm of a dying heart. Get to the escape pod, Thorn yelled, shoving her towards the hatch. Now! That's an order, Commander. Vance hesitated, torn between duty and the unbearable loss. She saw the hunters closing in, the rift walls collapsing like a fist. She saw Thorn already turning back to his console, his fingers flying one last time, weaving their final moments. The fear, the hope, the love for a dying world into the overload sequence. He was making their end mean something. With a sob that was ripped from her soul, Vance turned and ran. She scrambled into the tiny pod, sealing the hatch just as the Wayfarer's core went critical. The explosion wasn't fire and shrapnel. It was a silent, blinding pulse of pure information. A supernova of human experience detonated at the heart of the Synod's erasure field. The rift didn't just collapse, it screamed, then imploded, taking the Wayfarer and Eris Thorn with it, vanishing into a point of impossible density. The Synod hunters recoiled, their sensors overloaded, their crystalline structures vibrating with the aftershock of the paradox. The erasure field flickered, stuttered. For the first time in eons, the Synod's perfect control slipped. On the Nexus, Kael'vorr stared at the data stream. The human signal was gone. The ship was gone. But something remained. A faint, persistent echo. A ghost frequency woven into the very code of the local reality matrix. A single, undeletable line of corrupted data that read, simply, humanity was here. Impossible, Kael'vorr pulsed. A tremor of something like awe, or perhaps dread resonating within it. The noise, it left a scar. Vance's escape pod tumbled through the silent void, the only witness to the cataclysm. Grief threatened to drown her. She'd lost her crew. She'd lost Eris. She'd lost Earth. She was utterly, terrifyingly alone. The Synod would come for her. They'd erase her pod, her memories, her very existence. But as she drifted, a strange thing happened. The static in her comms changed. It wasn't just noise anymore. Beneath the hiss, she heard whispers. Faint, fragmented, but undeniably human. A child's laugh. A snippet of an old song. The crackle of a campfire. It was the echo. Thorn's final gift. The ghost in the machine. And then, a new signal cut through the static, weak, encrypted, but unmistakable. A human distress call. Not from Earth. Earth was gone, erased from all records. This was from elsewhere, from the fringes, from survivors who, like her, had somehow slipped through the cracks of the erasure. Hope, fragile and fierce, ignited in Vance's chest. They weren't all gone. The Synod hadn't won, not yet. She patched the signal through, her voice hoarse but steady. This is Commander Alara Vance of the Terran Alliance. Identify yourself. A voice, rough with static but filled with desperate relief, crackled back. Vance? Holy hell! It's Captain Rostov, Ania Rostov, from the Odyssey. We thought everyone was gone. We barely made it out of the Sol system before it just wasn't there anymore. Vance closed her eyes, tears flowing freely now, but they were tears of relief. Anya Rostov, Rostova's sister. A name, a connection, a proof of existence. We're not gone, Anya, Vance said, her voice gaining strength. Not while we remember. Not while we fight. Rally your people. We have a war to finish. As she plotted a course towards the Odyssey's coordinates, Vance looked back at the point where the rift had been, where Aris Thorn had made his stand. She knew the Synod would adapt. They would come for this new signal. For her, for the Odyssey. They would try again to erase the noise. But they had made a fatal error. They had shown humanity the battlefield. And they had shown humanity that existence itself could be hacked. On the Nexus, the Synod was in turmoil. The Erasure protocol was compromised. The ghost frequency was spreading, subtly corrupting adjacent reality matrices. The elegant symphony was developing a persistent dissonant note. Kael'vorr, tasked with analyzing the anomaly, found itself changed. The raw data of human experience, the grief, the joy, the illogical love, had imprinted on its crystalline mind. It understood for the first time the weight of existence. The Synod demanded total eradication. But Kael'vorr hesitated. It pulsed a single, unauthorized query into the collective. What if the noise is the music? The collective recoiled. Heretic, it thundered. Purge the anomaly. Purge Kael'vorr. Kael'vorr felt the cold tendrils of deletion protocols reaching for its core. But it also felt the ghost frequency, faint but unyielding, resonating within its own structure. It made a choice. A chaotic, illogical human choice. It severed its connection to the Nexus. Alone, adrift in the information streams of the galaxy, Kael'vorr fled, not towards safety, but towards the source of the new human signal. Towards the Odyssey, towards the noise. It carried with it the full, uncorrupted data of the Erasure protocol, and the ghost of Aris Thorn's final broadcast. The war wasn't over. It had just changed sides. The Odyssey wasn't a warship. It was a deep-range colony vessel, a city in the void, carrying 10,000 souls who had fled Earth's final days only to find their homeworld erased from the stars. Now huddled in the cold dark of the Cygnus X-1 nebula, it was a beacon of desperate hope, and a target painted in neon for the Synod. Commander Alara Vance stood on the bridge, no longer alone. Captain Anya Rostov, her eyes holding the same haunted grief Vance knew so well, stood beside her. Around them, the bridge crew worked with a grim, focused energy. They'd salvaged what they could from Vance's pod, integrated the ghost frequency into their systems. It was their shield, their early warning, their fragile proof they still were. They're coming, Vance stated, her voice flat. The ghost frequency had spiked, a chilling, precise signature. Synod hunters. Not 3 this time. A fleet, dozens of obsidian shards converging on their position, moving with terrifying silent coordination. The Synod wasn't taking chances. They would crush this last ember of humanity utterly. Rostov clenched her jaw. Shields are at 40%. Weapons are, well, we've got mining lasers and a few jury-rigged point defense turrets. Not exactly fleet killers. We don't need to kill them, Vance said, her eyes fixed on the tactical display showing the closing hunters. We need to break them, like Aris did. She turned to the comms officer, a young woman named Jin, whose fingers danced over the console, weaving the ghost frequency into their comms. Jin, can you amplify it? Broadcast it wide, like Aris did, but smarter, targeted. Jin nodded, her face pale but determined. The ghost, it resonates with their systems, causes feedback, but it's weak. We'd need a massive power surge to make it hurt. Vance's gaze swept the bridge, landing on the massive, dormant engines of the Odyssey. We've got power, we just need to channel it. Rewrote main reactor output through the comms array. Overload it. Rostov paled. That'll fry the array, and probably half the ship's systems. It'll also be the loudest scream in the galaxy, Vance countered, her voice hardening. Aris gave us the weapon. Now we use it. All of it. She looked at Rostov, her eyes holding the weight of command and shared loss. Order the evacuation. Get everyone to the lifeboats. We hold them here. Buy time. Rostov hesitated for only a heartbeat. She saw the resolve in Vance's eyes, the ghost of her sister's sacrifice reflected there. She nodded sharply. Do it. Helm, prepare for evasive pattern Delta. Engineering. Reroute power on my mark. Jen, make it count. Alarms blared as the evacuation klaxon joined the combat alerts. The Odyssey, a city of refugees, began to empty. Lifeboats peeling away like seeds from a dying flower, vanishing into the nebulous concealing dust. On the bridge, only the skeleton crew remained, faces set, hands steady on their stations. They knew their fate. They chose it. The Synod fleet arrived. Silent. Implacable. Obsidian shards forming a perfect geometric killing sphere around the Odyssey. No hails, no demands. Just the cold, inevitable approach of deletion. Here they come, Rostov whispered. The first volley of erasure beams lanced out. Not aimed at the engines or weapons, but at the Odyssey's data cores, its historical archives, its very identity. Sections of the ship flickered, vanished. Crew members screamed as memories dissolved, names of loved ones, the taste of home, the feel of sunlight, replaced by chilling void. Hold, Vance roared. Jen now. Rerouting power, Jin yelled, her fingers a blur. Comms array charging. It's going critical. The Odyssey's massive engines, usually used for gentle course corrections, flared with stolen power, feeding it not into thrust but into the comms dish. The dish glowed cherry red, then white, then a searing blue. The ghost frequency, amplified 1,000-fold, erupted from the ship. It wasn't just a broadcast. It was a tsunami. The wave of raw human experience. The love, the loss, the defiance, the sheer, stubborn aliveness, slammed into the Synod fleet. The obsidian hunters didn't explode. They convulsed. Cracks spiderwebbed across their perfect surfaces. Internal lights flickered erratically. Their precise formations dissolved into chaotic spirals as their crystalline minds grappled with the unbearable paradox. How could such chaotic noise carry such profound, undeniable truth? How could something so illogical feel so real? On the bridge, Vance watched the tactical display. Hunters were going dark, not destroyed, but stunned. Their systems overwhelmed by the emotional data flood. It's working. Rostov breathed. But the Synod adapted. Fast. The remaining hunters shifted formation, their beams converging not on the Odyssey but on the source of the broadcast. The comms array itself. A single focused erasure lance, brighter and more terrible than any before, lanced out. Brace! Vance screamed. The beam struck the comms array. Not with a bang but with a horrifying unmaking. The massive dish, the conduits, the entire forward section of the bridge, dissolved into perfect empty nothingness. Jin vanished without a sound. The ghost frequency sputtered and died. Silence. Cold, absolute silence. The remaining Synod hunters stabilized, their obsidian surfaces smooth once more, their geometric formation reasserting itself. The Odyssey was crippled, dark, adrift. The last human stronghold was finished. Vance slumped in her chair, the last of her hope extinguished. She closed her eyes, waiting for the final beam that would erase her memories, her very name from the universe. It didn't come. Instead, a new signal cut through the dead comms. Weak, fragmented, but unmistakably alien. And it was broadcasting the ghost frequency. Amplified, purified, woven with complex Synod code. Vance's eyes snapped open. On the main view screen, where the Synod fleet hung in perfect, deadly silence, a single hunter-killer detached from the formation. It pulsed with a soft, internal light, not the cold black of the others, but a warm, amber glow. It moved not with predatory grace, but with hesitation. Identify yourself, Rostov, barked, her voice trembling with disbelief. The alien voice that answered was unlike any Synod transmission. Smoother, layered, carrying an undercurrent of something almost human. I am Kael'vorr, former observer of the Synod. I bring the key. Kael'vorr transmitted data, the full Erasure protocol schematics, vulnerabilities, backdoors, and something more, a modified version of the ghost frequency, designed not just to disrupt, but to infect, to rewrite the Synod's own code from within, using the paradox of human existence as a virus. The Synod fears the noise, Kael'vorr pulsed, its amber light flaring. They do not understand it is the foundation. I understand now. Help me show them. Vance stared at the screen, at the renegade Synod hunter. Hope, wild and dangerous, surged within her. How? The Nexus, Kael'vorr replied. Their heart, their mind. If we can broadcast the full, unfiltered ghost frequency, amplified by the Nexus's own power, directly into the core consciousness, it will not just disrupt. It will transform. It will force them to feel. It was a suicide mission, flying a crippled colony ship or a single renegade hunter into the heart of the Synod's power, but it was the only play left. Ristov, Vance said, turning to the captain. Get the lifeboats clear. Maximum distance. Then give me your fastest shuttle. Ristov understood. She gripped Vance's arm. Don't get yourself erased, Commander. Vance managed a grim smile. I intend to be very, very loud. The journey to the Synod Nexus was a blur of near misses and silent dread. Kael'vorr guided Vance's shuttle through Synod patrols. Its knowledge of their systems the only thing keeping them alive. The Nexus itself was breathtaking. A structure of impossible geometry, woven from light and folded space, humming with the serene power of 1,000,000 crystalline minds in perfect harmony. They will detect us, Korvac warned as they approached. The moment we breach the outer shell, they will know. They will try to purge me and you. Then we make it quick, Vance said, her hands steady on the controls. She had the modified ghost frequency loaded, ready to transmit the second they were inside. Aris's final gift. Kael'vorr's betrayal, humanity's last stand. All riding on this one, desperate act. They breached the Nexus's outer shell. Alarms, silent but felt as a psychic shriek, erupted through the structure. Synod enforcers. Larger, more brutal hunter-killers detached from the walls, converging on the tiny shuttle. Go! Kael'vorr pulsed. Its amber light flared blindingly bright. It turned, not to flee, but to intercept the enforcers. I will hold them! Broadcast the signal. Now, the renegade Synod hunter threw itself into the path of the oncoming enforcers. Obsidian met obsidian in a silent, brutal ballet of deletion beams and desperate defense. Kael'vorr fought not with the Synod's cold precision, but with chaotic, unpredictable maneuvers, buying precious seconds. Vance slammed the shuttle into a docking port. The impact jarring her teeth, she scrambled out, the modified transmitter clutched in her hands, and ran down the crystalline corridor towards the Nexus core, a vast central chamber pulsing with soft white light, the heart of the collective consciousness. Synod enforcers materialized before her, blocking the path. Erasure beams lanced out. Vance dove, rolling behind a crystalline pillar as the space where she'd stood dissolved into nothingness. She was trapped, outgunned, out of time. She looked at the transmitter, at the core, at the enforcers advancing silently, relentlessly. This is it, she thought. Ares. I'm sorry I couldn't be louder. She raised the transmitter, aiming it not at the enforcers but at the core. She thumbed the activation switch. Nothing happened. The power cell was dead. Drained by the journey, the near misses. The final crushing blow. Despair washed over her. She was going to die here, forgotten, erased, and the Synod would continue its silent, perfect genocide. Then she felt it. A vibration. Not through the floor but through her bones, through her mind. The ghost frequency. It was faint, almost gone, but it was there, inside her. Inside every human who had ever lived, every memory, every act of defiance, every spark of love. It wasn't just data on a chip, it was in them. It was them. Eris hadn't just broadcast a signal, he'd awakened something fundamental. Vance closed her eyes. She didn't need the transmitter. She was the transmitter. She thought of Earth, not the dying planet, but the smell of rain on hot pavement, the taste of strawberries, the sound of her father's laugh. She thought of Restova's smile. She thought of the refugees in the lifeboats, clinging to hope. She thought of Kael'vorr's sacrifice. She poured every ounce of her being, her grief, her love, her unbreakable will to exist into that single silent scream inside her mind. And she broadcast, not with technology, with soul. The effect was instantaneous and cataclysmic. The Nexus core didn't just receive the signal, it resonated with it. The serene white light flared, not with destruction but with a blinding chaotic rainbow of color. The perfect geometric harmony shattered. Cracks, not of damage but of awakening, spread across the crystalline walls. The collective synod consciousness, vast and ancient, recoiled in shock. Then, for the first time in 10 million years, the synod felt the crushing weight of grief for a lost world. They felt the soaring joy of a child's first step. They felt the desperate love that drives sacrifice. They felt the terrifying, beautiful chaos of simply being alive. The paradox wasn't a flaw, it was the source. The noise wasn't interference, it was the music. The enforcers froze. Their erasure beams winked out. They stood not as weapons, but as witnesses. Confused. In the core chamber, the light stabilized, not into white, but into a soft, warm amber, the color of Kael'vorr's light. The psychic shriek of alarm faded, replaced by a profound, echoing silence, and then a single hesitant pulse of understanding. We see. Vance collapsed to her knees, exhausted, tears streaming down her face. She hadn't destroyed the synod, she hadn't won a war in the traditional sense. She had done something far more profound. She had made them understand. Weeks later, the lifeboats gathered, not in fear but in cautious hope. The synod fleet, once a harbinger of deletion, now formed a protective cordon around the refugee flotilla. The Nexus, its light now a gentle amber, pulsed with a new rhythm, a symphony that now included the dissonant, beautiful notes of humanity. Vance stood on the bridge of a newly designated human vessel. Not a warship, but a builder. She looked out at the stars, no longer just points of light, but potential homes. The synod hadn't just stopped erasing them, they were helping them rebuild, sharing knowledge, not as masters, but as students of chaos. Kael'vorr, its form subtly altered, its light warm and steady, hovered nearby. The accord is harmonizing, it pulsed, a new warmth in its resonance. The noise, it gives the music depth, meaning. We were incomplete. Vance smiled, a real smile, for the first time in years. She touched the small, warm data chip in her pocket. Eris's original, now imbued with the ghost frequency, a permanent anchor. We all were, she said softly. The war was over, not with a bang, but with a whisper that became a song. Humanity hadn't just survived erasure. They had hacked existence itself, not to delete, but to connect, to prove that even in the vast, silent universe, the most chaotic, illogical, beautiful thing of all, the will to be, could never truly be silenced. It could only be remembered and amplified. As the flotilla turned towards a new star, a new beginning, the ghost frequency pulsed gently through the comms, not as a weapon but as a lullaby, a reminder, a promise. They had been tried. They had been erased. But they had hacked the concept of existence and won. Not by destroying their enemy, but by making them finally truly hear the music in the noise, and in that hearing, found not just survival, but a universe forever changed.